If you make promises and then walk away, you will be held accountable.
Car maker Stellantis said it will move planned vehicle production from its plant in Brampton to Illinois, sparking fears about the future of Canada's auto industry.
The United States just dropped a bombshell that's igniting fury across Canada's auto industry. Thousands of jobs are vanishing overnight, factories are shutting down, and decades of trust have been shattered. Canada is exploding, ready to strike back with full force.
Admit that they don't have anything for Brampton. And frankly, they'll be doing those employees, their existing employees that are hanging on with those $45 an hour jobs, or the promise or the hope of those $45 an hour jobs. They'll be able to cut their ties and frankly get on with their lives.
The future of the plant is looking very, very bleak.
The United States just dropped a trade bomb that detonated straight into Canada's auto heartland. Not oil, not lumber, cars. For decades, Canadian and American industries ran in sync, side by side, engine by engine, assembly line by assembly line. But that symbiosis has shattered. Washington's new tariffs, relentless political pressure, and corporate opportunism have turned what was once a shared industry into a battlefield. And the casualties aren't abstract numbers. They're families, towns, and livelihoods.
It's not just the members here. We keep talking about 3,000 jobs. The reality is that the impact to the broader economy is more like 15 or 20,000 jobs. There's a lot of people that have been working here for generations and generations.
It began quietly, almost insidiously. The Trump administration reintroduced aggressive tariffs, up to 25%, on vehicles and parts that didn't meet the strict North American content rules under CUSMA. The message was clear: build in America or face the consequences. Automakers, predictably, got the hint. Production lines that had churned for generations north of the border began shutting down like dominoes falling in slow motion.
From Stellantis that it is moving production from Brampton to the United States.
It would be beneficial for the general public to understand that there's many spin-off jobs will be lost that are associated with jobs that come from this plant and jobs in the greater community.
Stellantis, the company behind Dodge, Chrysler, and Jeep, delivered the first gut punch. Despite more than $10 billion in Canadian taxpayer subsidies, Stellantis announced it was moving Jeep Compass production from Brampton, Ontario, to Illinois. 3,000 jobs vanished almost overnight. Jobs that had fed families, built communities, and supported local economies for decades. For the workers arriving that morning, there was no ceremony, no warning, only betrayal.
It's a tough pill, but perhaps it's a positive attribute of what the industry minister has added to the conversation.
GM followed, a quiet echo after the initial shockwave. Its Bright Drop electric delivery van production in Ingersoll, Ontario, was ending. That plant had been pitched as Canada's electric future, a symbol of clean, green innovation. But GM cited low demand and packed up. The truth was simpler. Washington's pressure worked. Production had to return south. And just like that, the plants that had been lifelines were stripped bare.
If you make promises and then walk away, you will be held accountable.
Canada's reaction was swift, calculated, and in many ways, cinematic. Ottawa did not flinch. Within hours of Stellantis' announcement, the federal government launched a 30-day formal dispute process, a legal and political gauntlet aimed squarely at the automaker. Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland and Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne appeared publicly, their statements cold and unwavering. You make promises, you walk away, you'll pay. These were not empty words.
General Motors saying today it is ending production of its Bright Drop electric delivery van in Ingersoll, Ontario.
The government unveiled a new weapon, a sharp, targeted cut in tariff-free vehicle imports. GM's quota was slashed by 24.2%. Stellantis, a brutal 50%. This wasn't negotiation, it was retribution, a ledger of betrayal with dollars as the measure of accountability. Ottawa's message was crystalline. Canada's taxpayers do not Bordoska bankroll corporate flight. Step out of line, and the cost is immediate, tangible, and painful.
We'll start the 30-day period of the formal dispute resolution process in order to bring back production at the Stellantis Brampton facility.
The mood across Canada shifted from shock to defiance. This wasn't politics. This was personal. Communities dependent on auto plants, suppliers, small businesses, even local cafes, felt the closures like a physical blow. Across talk shows, radio waves, and social media, anger spread. Union leaders promised boycotts, strikes, even lawsuits. Hashtags like Signs Boycott Jeep and Tarn GM Out of Canada began trending. Ordinary Canadians, once resigned to global trade forces, now had a unified voice. No more. This wasn't just a strike at the companies. It was a strike at the idea that Canada could be treated as a backup factory for American profit.
So we're looking for the support of the community. We're looking to have the government step up with some more support. We're hearing a lot of words from the government, but we're not seeing a lot of action.
And then came the economic leverage. Canadians had done this before. When U.S. tariffs hit steel and aluminum, the response was quiet but devastating. U.S. whiskey sales plummeted, grocery shelves gathered dust, cross-border travel declined. Now, that focus is on cars. Surveys indicate that 2/3 of Canadians say they'll avoid companies abandoning domestic workers. Consider the scale. Canada imports roughly $90 billion worth of vehicles annually from the U.S. This is not minor. It's the foundation of Detroit's export model. Withdraw that support, and the fallout is systemic, immediate, and brutal.
And we claim, and Premier Ford and the federal government claim we have a comparative advantage. We've only had a comparative advantage or done well because we had access to the largest market on planet Earth called the United States. It was always conditioned on that. The moment we lose access, then the game is over.
But Canada's role in the U.S. auto industry isn't just important, it's critical. Of all American auto exports, Canada is the single biggest buyer, gobbling up more than $23 billion worth of vehicles annually, outpacing Germany, Japan, and Mexico. Nearly 2/3 of all U.S. auto exports funnel through Canada and Mexico combined, with Canada alone acting as the keystone. Shut off that faucet, and Detroit doesn't just stumble. It hemorrhages. The America First tariffs, touted as protection for domestic jobs, have done the opposite. They safeguard a few assembly lines in Michigan while gutting America's most reliable customer. The irony? Brutal. Deliciously so.
But Canadians aren't taking it lying down. This is personal, and the way it's going, the U.S. auto industry might be the next big casualty of the Trump tariff war.
Look at the numbers. Canada exports about $43.8 billion in vehicles, but imports roughly $90 billion. That's not just imbalance. It's an American dependency masquerading as sovereignty. For every car Canada sends south, the U.S. sends 2 north. Think about that for a second. Trade analysts don't bother with hand-wringing. They just shake their heads. If Trump walls off Canada, one dryly notes, he walls off his own customers. It's like punching your reflection and then wondering why your face hurts. Harsh, yes. Accurate? Unquestionably. In a world obsessed with optics and political theater, reality is merciless.
Chinese automakers are going to come here eventually, and they're going to do it regardless of if there's a tariff or not.
And just when Washington thinks it's in control, another player quietly enters the arena. Patient, calculating, precise, China. While Ottawa and Washington trade punches, Beijing watches, timing every move. Canada's 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles has long kept Beijing at bay. AZ sub a concrete wall meant to shield North American manufacturers. But with U.S. betrayal cutting deep, Ottawa is reconsidering. Lowering or removing that barrier isn't desperation, it's strategy. A calculated invitation. And dangling before Canada is a carrot China knows has weight. Unrestricted access to Chinese markets for canola, peas, and meat. Billions in trade that have been locked out for years.
For the Detroit 3, for Toyota, for Hyundai to compete well against these Chinese brands, it's going to take something more than simply raising the tariff from 25% to 100%.
The potential here is staggering. Chinese EV companies have already perfected the playbook in Europe, snapping up abandoned factories in Hungary, Serbia, and Germany, retrofitting them, hiring locals, and producing electric vehicles at scale. Ontario and Quebec are sitting on the same canvas. Factories stand idle, workers are ready, and government incentives can be deployed with precision. Tens of thousands of Canadian jobs could emerge from this chaos. A domestic EV industry independent of Detroit isn't just possible, it's tantalizingly close.
But over the long term, there's nothing about the U.S. auto industry that suggests that it is going to be a global leader going forward, and there's nothing about the U.S.
And here's the cruelest twist. Trump's tariffs, designed to protect American jobs, may hand China the Canadian EV market on a silver platter. The very policy meant to bring production home could instead ensure that China fills the void left by fleeing U.S. automakers. Detroit wanted control. China is poised to take it. And Canada? Canada is watching, calculating, and quietly smiling behind closed doors.
The federal government threatened legal action after carmaker Stellantis said it will move planned vehicle production from its plant in Brampton to Illinois, sparking fears about the future of Canada's auto industry.
It's a textbook case of geopolitical and economic irony. The U.S. strikes first, thinking it's in command, and ends up setting the stage for a competitor to enter with far greater advantage. The more tariffs are enforced, the more American automakers bleed market share, the more Canada pivots toward alternative partners, and the more China gains influence. What was meant to be a unilateral show of power has become a strategic blunder of epic proportions.
When we lose access to that market, we can no longer compete, not because we're not good people, not because we're not innovative, not because we don't work hard. It's the economics, the arithmetic of you have to have long production runs.
Meanwhile, Canada holds all the cards. Vast lithium and nickel reserves, clean hydroelectric power, a skilled workforce, and open land for manufacturing create a perfect storm for electric vehicle production. With Washington alienating its neighbor, Canada can redefine its auto sector entirely, pairing domestic resources with international partners to build a market completely independent of American control. Detroit's loss is Ottawa's opportunity. Trump's tariffs aren't protecting U.S. jobs. They're drafting the blueprint for Canada to lead North America's auto future, with China as a willing ally.
They were unequivocal. The days of tariff-free cars going from Canada into the States are over, and we export approximately 80% of our output. The only reason we can produce cars competitively at a good price in Canada is because we have long production runs, because we export 80% to the U.S.
Canada isn't sitting idly, waiting for Beijing to knock politely. The federal strategy is ruthless in its clarity. Build it here, drive it here. This isn't some timid incentive program. It's a declaration of industrial war. Tax breaks, subsidies, and infrastructure for made-in-Canada EVs, battery plants, and clean energy supply chains are being rolled out like a tactical map. Ottawa is making it crystal clear. If you want a piece of the Canadian market, you will invest on Canadian soil. No excuses. No half measures. This isn't just revenge on U.S. automakers who walked away after billions in taxpayer bailouts. This is a calculated evolution, turning betrayal into opportunity and dependency into dominance.
Because those tariffs are going to make every car exported to the U.S. uneconomic. That means the producers of those cars are going to close down those plants.
The scale of the potential is staggering. Partnerships with Chinese or European automakers aren't just possible. They're a blueprint for a new auto order. U.S. dominance is suddenly optional. Canada holds the cards: lithium, nickel, and clean hydroelectric power, the very lifeblood of the electric revolution. Skilled workers stand ready. Factories, abandoned or idle, can be snapped up and repurposed. Vast land and political will provide the rest. The outcome is terrifying for Washington. Canada can go from being a supplier, a backup factory, a junior partner, to a global EV powerhouse, producing for domestic demand and exports alike, all while giving American automakers the cold shoulder. Detroit's influence shrinks as Canada rewrites the rules of the game. And this time, the U.S. isn't just losing jobs, it's losing control.
My heart goes out to the people in Windsor and Brampton and elsewhere, but I do believe this is the beginning of the end. I'm not for Canada, for the auto manufacturing industry, not auto parts, not auto services, just putting the cars together in Brampton and Windsor and so on.
The stage is set for a new reality. But economic warfare is rarely contained. About 60% of North American auto parts cross the border multiple times before final assembly. Tariffs and production shifts ripple across the supply chain. Prices rise, deliveries stall, shortages appear. Eventually, the burden lands where it always does: consumers. This is mutually assured economic destruction, a slow burn where both sides lose unless a new order emerges. Meanwhile, other global actors wait in the wings. BYD, NIO, Hyundai, Kia, all poised to seize market share abandoned by Detroit. The collapse of US-Canada supply chains isn't a small disruption. It's a vacuum waiting to be filled. History is clear. When two giants fight, a third always profits. Canada's counterstrike is methodical. Ottawa is leveraging its own assets, raw materials, skilled labor, and political will. A new auto order emerges, one where partnerships, not coercion, define the market. With China or Europe willing to invest, Canada could build electric vehicles powered by domestic energy, exported worldwide, independent of American brands. This is a country seizing its own destiny, creating jobs, technology, and influence.
That continuing to try to tether our industry to the U.S. industry is the best bet. So I know China is challenging for lots of different reasons, but if we're looking at it pure from where do we want to be do we want an auto industry in Canada, we need to have that conversation.
The fallout is dramatic. The U.S. intended to bring jobs home. Canada intended to protect its workers. Instead, Detroit faces empty showrooms, production slowdowns, and a consumer base that might never return. Trump's tariffs may have looked good in speeches, but reality is far harsher. Canada's market, once a reliable export engine, could pivot to China and Europe, redefining power in North American auto manufacturing.
And because there's so much capacity at home, and the market at home has a price war, the Chinese automakers themselves are super motivated to get out and push their products into Europe, the United States.
The story isn't over. Canada's patient years of trade diplomacy, of taking U.S. decisions in stride, have ended. Ottawa's 30-day formal dispute process against Stellantis is just the opening move. Public defiance, boycotts, and economic leverage are setting the stage. For long-term consequences, China's calculated entry could tilt the balance, while U.S. automakers scramble to protect what they assumed was untouchable. This is more than a trade war. It's a lesson in betrayal, consequence, and adaptation. Canada isn't reacting with panic. It's strategizing with precision. Every move, from quotas to incentives to international partnerships, signals a nation stepping out from the shadow of its closest neighbor.
Small countries can only survive like Sweden if they have access to a huge market called the European Union. If Trump cuts us off...
Decades of partnership, billions in taxpayer subsidies, and thousands of jobs later, the alliance between the U.S. and Canada's auto industries lies fractured. Betrayal has a price, and Ottawa is collecting. 2/3 of Canadians ready to boycott U.S. vehicles isn't theory. It's potential annihilation for Detroit's dominance. Meanwhile, China waits like a patient predator, ready to take the spoils. In this high-stakes game, Canada has one advantage: control over the future, resources, workforce, and the political will to leverage both. U.S. isolationism, meant to protect domestic jobs, might instead trigger a seismic shift. A Canadian auto industry that thrives independently, partners globally, and leaves Washington wondering how a simple tariff could spiral into strategic catastrophe.
So it's not the end of the world. Auto manufacturing is 2% of GDP. Will it hurt those communities? Absolutely. Do we feel terrible for those people? Yes. But it won't blow up the economy, the Canadian economy.
The narrative is clear. Betrayal leads to retaliation. Retaliation sparks innovation. Innovation attracts global partners. And in the end, the map of North American auto manufacturing might no longer be painted in Detroit colors. It might be Canadian green, powered by lithium, nickel, and hydro, with global alliances replacing old dependencies. Canada has snapped. Its patience is exhausted. Its strategy is precise. Its opportunity is immense. And the U.S., once the trusted ally and partner, may soon discover the cost of betrayal. Not in words, but in lost factories, lost sales, and a Canadian auto industry rising from the ashes with global reach. When betrayal sparks an explosion, Can the U.S. survive as Canada rises from the wreckage of its own auto industry?